So in Season 5, we got a brand new rifle and SMG, and in today's video, we'll be focusing on the long-range one, which is the STG44. This one has easily jumped into the meta conversation, and probably one of the most dominant weapons we've had in Warzone 3, or at least Warzone Urzikstan, including the new Rebirth Island, Fortune's Keep, all those types of things. And I'll talk about what they did different with this weapon than they've done in the past, and then also kind of talk about how I think this is how they're going to balance some of the other weapons that are just weaker overall, because they've done a few things with this weapon that we really haven't seen since Warzone 1. And with this introduction of the STG, I thought it'd be worth comparing to a ton of other weapons that people are currently using. There's a couple that I left off here, like the M13 or the Pull-em-Yacht, but that's primarily because I had to cut off the list somewhere, and there's probably about 5 others you can list that people are enjoying at the moment, whether it's the single fire TAQ V or whatever the heck. There are tons of options. So I went ahead and went through here. One thing I did want to highlight is there is a combo shot that's important. One of the people in the comments section on the previous video was arguing that how does this happen? How do we get a combination shot that says 700? Especially when something like the chest leads to a 630, the neck and the head lead to a 630. How does this work? They were like going against me saying, well, the BP50 is amazing. You're wrong. So I thought I'd go ahead and reiterate this because I think it's, interesting topic to discuss. How this gets is like the highest probability of TTK you're going to get. Sometimes you can get a faster TTK. Sometimes you can get a slower TTK. But the number that I've kind of gone there is kind of through trial and error, figuring out getting the highest probability of getting that TTK. If we go to True Game Data's website, we can go ahead and look at the BP50, the shots to kill calculator. If we go ahead and select the chest, which we've done here above my webcam, we can go ahead and see that if you get one stomach shot or one leg shot or any, the upper leg or the lower leg, so that's either the thigh or the toe, you're going to get a TTK of 700. Unless you go around and you just have 100% accuracy and it'd be impossible for you to get a stomach shot, then more than likely the TTK you're going to get is this. If this said something like 3 or 4, all right, cool. Less likely you're aiming for the chest. You're most likely going to get the chest. Even if this was only including the legs, it would still be a high probability. People bunny hop, jump. So that is an important factor. So sometimes what it can be, if you just go to look at the chest TTK, it's going to feel like, what the heck? Why is this TTK? It's a 630. Clearly, it's goated. Why aren't people using it? Well, because sometimes instances like this happen where the TTK is variable based off the shot location. When I look at the Holger 26, it did get nerfed, and you'd think, oh, you know what? 766 up close TTK isn't horrible. But the same thing holds true, and the same thing holds up even if you end up with one shot to the stomach or legs, you'll get an additional shot to kill, which raises that TTK to 850. So although it is true you can probably get a faster TTK, more often than not, you'll probably get the TTK that I have in the combination shot section, which we can see there. And that's kind of where that lies. And that's what's made the STG so dominant, because it has a 600 TTK, which we've seen. That's as fast as pretty much all the SMGs and even faster up close. Obviously, you got drawbacks, the sprint to fire, ADS, and other things compared to an SMG, usually 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds slower than that 200-ish that we usually end up on with SMGs for ADS speed. So that's one thing they've changed. They made the TTK up close much faster. And I think eventually this part will probably get, a hair nerfed. They'll modify the damage so it'll be like an 8 shot to kill, which will probably land at somewhere around 700. Because if we compare this to the Kastov 762, we can kind of see where the close range lays out. So the Kastov is like a mirror version of the STG with a smaller mag, same fire rate, worse damage profile, close, medium, and long. So there's no reason to use the Kastov 762. So they're not really copying that formula. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look at some of these. What I ended up doing is I had to go ahead and reevaluate these again. I went back in and played with these in the firing range, playing with different attachments, experimenting, so I can get a good feel for where they compare head to head, percentage-wise, shooting targets at approximately 50 meters. We get the perfect burst SVA. Keeping in mind that this is when you put it in burst fire and your timing is perfect. Sometimes it could be a little bit slower, closer to the regular fire rate. If you tap it incorrectly or you end up holding it because it's not in burst fire, you can get a slower TTK. But this is a perfect burst TTK. We got the STG, Holger, we go down all the way the list. The base bullet velocity on the STG, I don't know if you guys notice anything, but we can see right here it's at 960. This is actually higher than we experienced in Warzone 1, but we're not having the attachments have the same impact that Warzone 1 has. So when you actually combine these, you end up with bullet velocities that are a little bit higher. but not nearly as much as Warzone 1. I think inevitably they'll have a swift boost to all of these because they should be sitting around 850 with attachments that boost it significantly, or in this case, 960, where you have attachments there. So I think this is setting a precedent. They're testing things out. And when we get a future balancing pass that they kind of alluded to in the previous dev call, I think we're going to get guns that are more similar to the STG44. On top of that, our ranges are mirroring that of Warzone 1, with the 64-meter range being that furthest damage drop-off. That's pretty in line with a lot of the meta options we had at the time, whether it's a Growl, AMAX, whatever, you have those options. This important damage one is with the barrel and with the new muzzle, which doesn't change the range. And if you put on ammo, it might have been different here. And the SVA, that's one that you might choose high velocity over high grain or vice versa. But you can see where these damage drop off. This also impacts weapons as a meta option, because even though we focus on that last damage range, the truth of the matter is that a majority of your gunfights will probably happen between the 30 to 50 meter range. So it's very important to guns to at least have that amount of range for consistency of TTK. At the furthest range, then we get into different conversations about accuracy, bullet velocity, but in general, a lot of them you can build them out, and then you got to solve for that range, which can be an issue in some cases because then you end up with too much recoil or not enough bullet velocity or something along those things where it goes that route. So I've gone through, put some little notes on them, rearranged them based off accuracy. And there are different things like here where a lot of people recommend, hey, you should try the Subverter. It's great right now. It is pretty good, but the TTK isn't good enough to justify the increased recoil. Even if you shoot straight with it and all these things, you're amazing, you're God tier player, cool, keep using it, you're enjoying it, but that's not something I would necessarily recommend over the other options, the same way I would never recommend the Kastov 762 over the STG. It's just not going to happen. So you got to keep that in perspective. You can use whatever you want. Guns can be tons of fun. There's a lot of options to choose right now outside of the STG, even though the STG is probably the most dominant. So with that, we have the Burst SVA, which has high velocity, high grain. That's going to be the difference there. No recoil, pretty straightforward. STG, ridiculous TTK within the 64 meters, and then average beyond that. A lot of these guns can compete beyond that damage range, but within that, you're losing to the STG most of the time, and it's super accurate, even more accurate than the Holger 26, which got that nerf where that one shot reduces the TTK or increases the TTK to make it worse. 40-meter range is kind of a huge drawback. If you take someone on 50 meters, you're already getting the worst TTK, and it's bad on top of that. TAQ Eradicator, pretty good. 50 meters could be, it's kind of on that borderline. I think a lot of people lean towards this, especially if you play quads or you want to play fast where you're not stopped to reload. This one's pretty good. A lot of damage per mag, downs per mag. First few shots are a little bit weird because it goes a little bit weird. There is a semi-auto option with there that's insane. It'll make the TTK look crazy, but the reality is if you're actually spamming the trigger, you're not going to really be able to reach those trigger caps. You're going to end up with something like the Core 45 where on paper, unless somebody's using a macro, the TTK is not obtainable, and they went and nerfed that to the ground. MCW, pretty good. Range is average, but close, not good. At that closest range, it's going to fail to compete. Holger 5.56, 40-round mag is kind of rough, especially when you have these other options. Even though its range is very good, there's other options where you're just going to pick over it. BP50, again, another great option, accurate, fast rate of fire. So it's easy to get on target. If you hit, you can actually delete. If you get off target, it's easy to miss targets and you miss multiple shots because how fast it fires. And it only has that small mag. BAL 27 is essentially the MTZ, but a hair weaker. There's really no reason to use the BAL over the MTZ in its current state. BAL got its 4th buff or something like that, and it's still not in the conversation. Does have a little bit better bullet velocity, shoots way straighter after the update. You can see it's pretty much in line with the MTZ, but a hair weaker. Then we have the MTZ 5.56, fast rate of fire, easy misses, same thing that we talked about the BP, and the smaller mag. It would ideally benefit from a 60-round mag, but it does have great range, which is great. I think this one's a super fun resurgent small map type of thing. Kastov 762, really no reason to use it. Small mag, more recoil, poor TTK, but I just included it because it is an MWIII gun. There's not many of those to go around. SOA Subverter, TTK, like I said, doesn't justify that. So we'll go ahead and start over here with the Subverter and the TAQ Evolvere. Those are a couple good options. Obviously, I didn't talk too much about the TAQ Evolvere, but it's incredibly low recoil. Kind of build on the Subverter. This new quartermaster suppressor is insane. The paracord grip is very good. I think it's very important to use the quartermaster on a lot of the builds. Plus, Now it's working like a monolithic suppressor. The paracord is kind of one of those ones you can kind of mix and match. A lot of people are liking this as an underbarrel, but they're still also liking a stock. If the stock provides a lot of benefit, like in this case where maybe you go with the Motion V2 Heavy, that you can use that over the paracord, use whatever optic you want, biggest mag, and then generally using the barrel that's giving you the better range or better recoil control or whatever your preference is. Every gun's going to be slightly different. It's not a one size fits all. So I wouldn't necessarily say just copy this and it works for you, because you might want to change things up based off your preferences on ADS speed or whatever the case is. This one's straightforward. You just shoot straight and you're pretty good to go. It has a little bit more recoil than I would prefer, but overall it's a pretty good gun. TAQ Evolvere. This one's actually pretty insane. It has almost no recoil, especially utilizing that new muzzle. That kind of just makes it so that you can shoot and, you know, you're going to have that control over it. It's not going to hardly, maybe a minor bouncing, but overall you're not seeing a lot of recoil. Pretty easy to control, just slow LMG. Here's a Kastov. Wouldn't really recommend. You could build it kind of however you want. It's not going to kill fast enough. You might as well use the STG. MCW. We got the brand new camo on it, which is pretty nice. And with this quartermaster, it actually feels pretty good. Like I said, you can go with stock instead of an underbarrel, or you can go ahead and switch depending on the muzzle you want. I think a lot of times people just generally go with the Cyclone barrel or whatever the case is. Pretty good option. Like I said, it does have its weaknesses. I feel like multiplayer, it shines a little bit more because it starts off with relatively no recoil and then it has a little bit of wobble, but for the most part, it's basically a non-issue. So I would say definitely recommend trying that out if you want to go ahead and try that out. Again, STG is probably the most dominant one you want to focus on. I think it even outshines the SMG in the SMG category. But we'll get to that when we talk about a close range meta sooner rather than later, right? And then we got the 26 here, the Holger 26. Again, this one kind of got nerfed. If you're an LMG fan, you'll still enjoy it. But for the most part, I don't think it's the go-to anymore. You might as well switch to something else. The meta has shifted. Enjoy the shift while you can. Val 27 with this master suppressor, it's way better. You could go again, like I said, rear stock if you want. This one does help out quite a bit if you want to go that instead, and then you kind of have a build something like that. Overall, this thing is actually ridiculous. Compared to how it was before, I actually went off like on a rant on this specific weapon, on what it needed to have changed, and they improved the recoil so significantly, but the STG coincidentally came out at the same time. It's kind of an issue there. And at its furthest damage range, it's not like a melty TTK. So we'll see kind of where it finds its place once the STG does get its close range nerf. I think the long range is perfectly fine. Just that first damage needs to be closer to 700 instead of 50 milliseconds faster than the SMG meta, right? It's kind of crazy. And then we have the BP as well as the MTZ. We got so many good camos recently. And like you can see, I've kind of gone with the general theme. Take advantage of those. If you're struggling to get these, wins count beyond the daily challenges. Also, if you do zombies contracts, every 3 counts. You place in the top 10, I believe it is, for Warzone. It also counts as a little bit of a point. Make sure you select those and you have access to those attachments. I covered those in the previous video, kind of talking about. So you can see, overall, one of those guns that it just fires fast. It goes in the M13 category. Pretty nice. The mag does feel a little bit weak. And you're like, what the heck? Other guns have 50 round, but they do more damage. Like, that's the trade-off, right? We got this one here. This is the zombies camo. We can go that route. And with this new suppressor, it's kind of like the main go-to for everything, because it does those, because it does that benefit where you're going to get recoil kick, horizontal recoil, and vertical recoil. And look at compared to the Cassis. It's like the Cassis on steroids, and you stay off the mini-map, which you think isn't a big deal, but it reduces third partying. I think aggressive players don't notice it quite as much because they want the kills, but I think the average player definitely notices not getting third partied as much when you have a suppressor on. Just chasing red dots, a lot easier when you actually pop up as a red dot. Holger 556, still pretty good. But again, whenever they decide to give us a bigger magazine, maybe we'll have fun with that. But overall, I think that's its biggest weakness. It's like the Holger 26, but it's not an LMG, so it's not as slow and clunky. The reload is kind of like a mag type, so it is faster. And basically is a little bit slightly slower rifle with the small mag. So we'll kind of see how that one goes. SVA, still amazing, still pretty good. With this suppressor, it actually allows you to maybe run high grain. I know a lot of people were doing that already, but this allows you to kind of have that point where you're getting 1,000 bullet velocity. If you want to go ahead and drop the suppressor, you can do that. You can go with the underbarrel if you wanted to help out with that. I know people go brew and heavy, or they do the stock. The stock is pretty good on this one. If you go with this specific one here, the main V6 stock, it helps with that. Even though you're burst firing, we've talked about this for 6 months now, but there's always new people in the stream. If you go ahead and fire the weapon, you're looking at the bullet spread. And basically what you want is a tight bullet spread, which is fairly consistent. There's a little bit of a variety there, but there are some instances where you can get these bullets going random ways, and it's not going to allow you to shoot straight. Versus you'll be able to go ahead and just spam this, and it's going to go ahead and go that direction while still maintaining that bullet velocity. That's going to go ahead and bring us to the top options in the moment. I think SVA is still probably the best ultimate long range, just because you can't really miss at those ranges. But I think the Taq Eradicator's kind of bumped up. It got a huge buff, especially with these new attachments on MW2 guns. It's nice to have some other MW2 guns in the mix. You can see that initial fire rate at the beginning, and then it slows down. The TTK is shifting at those points. Obviously, you fire faster bullets, you're going to kill quicker. So it's just something to be aware of. There's a cooldown a little bit on that. So this is one of those ones where the TTK can be a little bit deceptive if you're missing too many of those initial bullets on the TTK. Then the STG, I think there's a few different options. I talked about this in the previous video. You could switch barrels. The main reason I decided to go with this first one is the extra damage range going up to 65 meters is huge. I think that is a huge difference. 5 extra meters at that very variable range. This allows you to basically challenge everything. You're going to kill faster and allows you to still have pretty good recoil. There's a difference in ADS speed and movement, but I think ADS, you could take the hit, especially with this new suppressor. And the stock tends to work better than most of the underbarrels. You might have combinations you prefer over this, but I think overall this one is a pretty tried and true option at the moment, where it's like the AMAX, but with less recoil, better bullet velocity, better damage up close. It's actually kind of insane. And we'll kind of see how it goes from there. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.